February 14th, 1943. A barren stretch of Tunisian desert near Sidi Bou Zid, Obergefreiter Klaus Hoffman pressed himself against the rocky outcrop, watching American infantry advance across open ground 300 meters ahead. He'd been in combat for nearly 4 years now. Poland, France, the endless steppes of Russia. He knew what enemy fire sounded like. He knew the rhythm of battle. This was different. The Americans weren't charging. They weren't retreating. They were walking forward, firing as they moved, not the measured crack-pause crack of bolt-action rifles being cycled between shots, a continuous rolling thunder that never stopped. His Karabiner 98K felt suddenly heavy in his hands. The bolt-action that had served him faithfully through a dozen engagements now seemed inadequate, outdated, slow. Intelligence had briefed them. The Americans carried a new rifle, semi-automatic, 8 rounds, that fired as fast as a man could pull the trigger. Hoffman had dismissed it as exaggeration, propaganda meant to explain away defeats elsewhere, but now he was hearing it firsthand, feeling it. 8 rounds in 6 seconds. Then a metallic ping as the empty clip ejected. Then another 8 rounds, and another. The mathematics were brutal. While he was working his bolt, raising, pulling back, pushing forward, lowering, chambering a fresh cartridge, the Americans were firing 3, sometimes 4 times. His squad mate to the left jerked backward, hit. Another German went down 15 meters away. The volume of fire was impossible. There couldn't be that many Americans. But the 8-round clips, emptying in seconds, then fresh clips slammed home in 2 more seconds, created a firepower density that made the advancing Americans seem like twice, maybe 3 times, their actual number. Hoffman rose from cover, aimed at a crouching American rifleman, fired. The 7.92mm round kicked against his shoulder. He worked the bolt, up, back, forward, down. 2 seconds, maybe 3. In those seconds, the American fired 4 times. More German soldiers went down. The rate of fire was like nothing Hoffman had experienced. Not even the Russian submachine guns in Stalingrad had felt like this. Those were close-range weapons, inaccurate beyond 50 meters. These American rifles were hitting targets at 300 meters. Aimed fire. Continuous aimed fire. Then Hoffman understood what his Hauptmann had tried to explain back at their assembly area near Kasserine. "This changes everything," the captain had said, examining a captured American rifle. "We're not fighting the French anymore. We're not even fighting the Russians. The Americans have built something that makes every one of their soldiers worth 3 of ours in a firefight." If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you're watching from today. What German infantrymen would learn over the next 2.5 years would reshape how they fought, how they died, and ultimately how they lost the war. For nearly 4 decades, the bolt-action rifle had dominated infantry combat across the globe. Since 1898, the Mauser 98 system, refined into the Wehrmacht's standard Karabiner 98K, represented what military theorists believed was the pinnacle of infantry rifle design. Accurate out to 500 meters, reliable in mud, sand, snow, and Arctic cold. Simple enough for a conscript to master in weeks of training. The Kar98K chambered the powerful 7.92 by 57mm Mauser cartridge. Muzzle velocity of 2,493 feet per second, the round could penetrate a steel helmet at 600 meters. Its 5-round internal magazine fed smoothly through stripper clips inserted from the top of the receiver. A well-trained German infantryman could deliver 10 to 15 aimed shots per minute. Under ideal conditions, perhaps 20. This had been sufficient for Wehrmacht tactical doctrine, which centered squad firepower around the MG-34 or MG-42 machine gun. The machine gun killed. The riflemen maneuvered and protected the gunner. The system worked. It had worked in Poland in 1939, where German forces crushed the Polish army in 5 weeks. It worked in France in 1940, where the Wehrmacht achieved what Imperial Germany had failed to accomplish in 4 years of World War I, defeating France in 6 weeks. It worked in Yugoslavia, in Greece, across vast stretches of the Soviet Union. German tactical doctrine was proven. German weapons were tested. German soldiers were confident. Then in 1943, German forces in North Africa began encountering something that didn't fit their tactical assumptions. something that made experienced soldiers question what they knew about infantry combat. The M1 Garand, adopted by the United States Army in 1936, represented a revolutionary departure from military orthodoxy. Chambered in .30-06 Springfield, a cartridge ballistically nearly identical to the German 7.92 round, the M1 was the world's first semi-automatic rifle to become standard issue for an entire army. Gas-operated through a rotating bolt, the rifle fired every time the trigger was pulled until its 8-round unblocked clip ran empty. The action cycled automatically. The shooter stayed on target. The rifle did the work. The statistics were stark, undeniable. An M1-equipped American rifleman could deliver 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute, 3 to 4 times faster than a German with a Kar98. The practical combat rate, accounting for stress and battlefield conditions, was closer to 30 rounds per minute. But even 30 represented a crushing advantage. What made this difference devastating wasn't just speed, it was the nature of continuous fire. A bolt-action rifleman had to break his sight picture after every shot, reach up with his right hand, work the bolt action, raise it, pull it back, push it forward, lower it, reacquire the target through the sights, fire again. The cycle took 2 to 3 seconds. During those seconds, he was vulnerable, exposed, unable to shoot. The semi-automatic Garand operator stayed in the fight continuously. Fire. The recoil cycle automatically chambered the next round. Fire again. The rifle's gas system absorbed enough recoil energy to keep the shooter's sight picture stable. Fire. 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 8 rounds without breaking position, without losing the target, without that vulnerable moment when the rifle was cycling manually. German officers studying captured M1s in Tunisia during early 1943 were impressed by the weapon's quality. The machining tolerances were excellent, tighter than German arsenal standards. The gas system proved reliable even in desert conditions, where sand and dust killed lesser weapons. The rifle's weight, 9.5 pounds loaded, was comparable to the 9-pound Kar98. Effective range was listed at 500 yards, identical to German doctrine for infantry rifles, but integration of such a weapon into Wehrmacht tactics would have required a complete restructuring of infantry doctrine and logistics. The Kar98 had already been manufactured in quantities exceeding 14 million rifles by 1943. German arsenals were operating at maximum capacity. Retooling factory floors to produce an entirely different rifle design would cost months of downtime. Months when no rifles would be produced at all. Months the Wehrmacht could not afford while fighting in Russia, North Africa, and soon Italy simultaneously. More critically, Germany's ammunition production capacity was already strained to its limits. A semi-automatic rifle dramatically increased ammunition consumption per soldier. Instead of 10 to 15 rounds per minute, now it was 40 to 50, 5 times the consumption. German logistics, already stretched across 2,000 miles of front in Russia and increasingly interdicted by Allied bombing, couldn't support it. The ammunition simply didn't exist. The Germans did field their own semi-automatic rifle, the Gewehr 43, in limited numbers, starting in late 1943. Roughly 400,000 were produced by war's end, but the G43 never became standard issue. For comparison, American factories produced over 5.4 million M1 Garands between 1936 and 1945. For every German semi-automatic rifle, the Americans fielded 13. The average German infantryman carried a Kar98 from 1939 to 1945. From the invasion of Poland to the final defense of Berlin, the bolt-action rifle remained standard, not because it was better, not because German engineers couldn't design semi-automatics, but because German industry, by 1943, was fighting for survival. Every factory, every machine tool, every skilled worker was allocated to keeping existing production lines running. Innovation was a luxury Germany could no longer afford. Meanwhile, American industrial capacity was just reaching its stride. The arsenal of democracy, President Roosevelt called it, By 1943, American factories were producing war materials at a rate that exceeded the combined output of Germany, Japan, and Italy together. Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms Company together manufactured M1 Garands at a rate of thousands per week. Production never slowed. Production never stopped. The American rifle gives their infantry squad the continuous fire of a light machine gun. One German after-action report from Normandy noted. Combined with their actual machine guns and the volume of artillery support they receive, American forces achieve fire superiority with fewer men than our doctrine assumes necessary. The mathematics were brutal, inescapable. An American infantry squad with 8 M1 Garands could theoretically deliver 320 rounds per minute of sustained semi-automatic fire before even considering their Browning automatic rifle or machine guns. A German squad with 8 Kar98 KS8 delivered 80 to 120 rounds per minute of bolt-action fire. This 3-to-1 firepower advantage meant that, man for man, an American rifle squad outgunned a German rifle squad before reinforcements, artillery support, or heavier weapons entered the equation. For offensive operations, this mattered. For defensive operations, it was catastrophic. What Lieutenant General George S. Patton would later call the greatest battle implement ever devised was proving its worth in the deserts of North Africa, in the mountains of Italy, and soon on the beaches of Normandy. But in early 1943, most German soldiers still hadn't faced it in sustained combat. That was about to change. In February 1943, Generalfeldmarschall von Rommel reviewed intelligence assessments on American equipment captured during the battles at Sidi Bou Zid and Kasserine Pass. His forces had inflicted sharp tactical defeats on the inexperienced U.S. Second Corps, pushing American units back over 50 miles in some sectors. The victories validated certain German assumptions about American fighting quality. American commanders showed inexperience. American tactical coordination was poor. American soldiers seemed unprepared for the speed and violence of German armored warfare. Even American tanks, the M3 Grant and early M4 Sherman models, were deemed inferior to German Panzer Mark IIIs and Mark IVs in armor protection and gun penetration. But the intelligence reports on American weapons were more mixed, more concerning. One German intelligence summary dismissed the M1 Garand as suitable for a nation of farmers and hunters. Semi-automatic fire sacrifices the precision and range necessary for proper military combat. The assessment reflected a worldview shaped by different tactical traditions and 4 years of successful campaigns. German marksmen prized the Kar98K's accuracy at extended range. The weapon's bolt-action design enforced discipline. Each shot mattered. Each shot was aimed, calculated, controlled. Semi-automatic fire seemed wasteful, undisciplined, the product of a wealthy nation that could afford to spray ammunition rather than conserve it for carefully aimed shots. This interpretation missed the point entirely. What German observers failed to grasp was that the Americans weren't sacrificing precision. The M1's gas-operated action absorbed recoil efficiently through a long-stroke piston system. The rifle's weight, 9.5 pounds, and its carefully balanced stock design promoted instinctive pointing. Most critically, staying on target through multiple shots beat reacquiring the target after working a bolt. The Americans were building their infantry tactics around a different philosophy entirely. Suppression through volume. Keep the enemy's head down with continuous fire while maneuver elements advanced. Fix the enemy in place. Deny them the ability to move, to aim, to return effective fire. The M1 made every rifleman a base of fire. 8 men with M1 Garands could suppress an enemy position as effectively as a light machine gun crew, and they could do it while moving, while advancing, while maintaining offensive momentum. German doctrine still centered on the machine gun as the primary killing weapon. The MG-34 and its successor, the MG-42, were the squad's main firepower. The riflemen existed to protect and support the MG team, to carry ammunition, to provide security, to maneuver only after the machine gun had fixed the enemy in place. This worked brilliantly when German forces held the initiative, when they could position their machine guns to enfilade advancing enemies, when they could choose the ground and dictate the tempo of battle. But by 1943, the Wehrmacht was increasingly fighting defensive battles. Italy, Russia, soon France. And in defense, the continuous semi-automatic fire of M1-equipped infantry suppressed German positions more effectively than bolt-action fire could answer. The Germans couldn't move, couldn't maneuver, couldn't bring their tactical superiority to bear when they were pinned down by a storm of 30-06 rounds. American production continued accelerating throughout 1943 and into 1944. Every American infantry division fielded over 7,100 M1 rifles. Every replacement battalion brought more. The stream never stopped, never slowed. By mid-1944, essentially every American infantry soldier in Europe carried an M1 Garand. The rifle had become as much a symbol of American military power as the Sherman tank or the P-51 Mustang. Germany's industrial base, even before Allied strategic bombing intensified in late 1943, couldn't match this output. The Kar-98 remained in production not because it was superior, but because retooling was impossible. German war production focused on maintaining existing capacity, not innovating new systems. Every machine tool, every factory worker, every kilogram of steel was allocated to producing weapons already in the system. Tanks, aircraft, submarines, artillery, ammunition. The industrial base couldn't absorb the shock of converting to new rifle production. German soldiers began recognizing the distinctive metallic ping sound when an M1's en-bloc clip ejected after the 8th round. The sound became iconic, identifiable across a battlefield. Some German tactical manuals suggested timing attacks during those 2-second reloading intervals, exploiting the brief moment when an American rifleman was vulnerable. But American tactics evolved to counter this. Squad members reloaded in sequence, never all at once. Someone was always shooting. The wall of fire never broke. The Americans don't shoot like soldiers. One German veteran of the Eastern Front wrote home in late 1943 after his first engagement with US forces in Italy. They shoot like they're emptying buckets. We can't answer that volume of fire. We fire twice and hear 8 shots before we chamber our 3rd round. It's like fighting a machine. The Wehrmacht was learning an uncomfortable lesson that German military theorists had not anticipated. Superior training and tactical doctrine couldn't overcome a 3-to-1 firepower disadvantage at the squad level. Not consistently, not sustainably. Not when that disadvantage appeared in every firefight, in every engagement, at every level from squad to division. And nowhere would this lesson be hammered home more violently, more definitively, than on the beaches of Normandy in June 1944. June 6, 1944. 06:45 hours. Omaha Beach, Normandy. The first American troops to cross the seawall at Dog Green Sector carried M1 Garand rifles slick with seawater and coated with sand. Half the men in the first wave were casualties. Bodies floated in the surf. Wounded soldiers dragged themselves toward cover that didn't exist. But the survivors who made it off the beach, who found shelter behind tank obstacles and concrete debris, brought something German defenders in the WN-62 strongpoint had never faced in such concentrated numbers: sustained semi-automatic fire from infantry advancing under artillery support. Oberleutnant Bernhard Frerking commanded the concrete bunker complex overlooking the beach. His MG-42 machine guns had slaughtered Americans in the water. The guns rattled at 1,200 rounds per minute, tearing through landing craft and bodies with mechanical efficiency. The beach should have been impregnable. Every approach was covered by interlocking fields of fire. Every meter of sand had been pre-registered for artillery. The Americans should have died before reaching the seawall. But the Americans who reached cover didn't take defensive positions and wait for reinforcements. They didn't pin themselves down. They advanced under fire with a volume of suppression that Frerking's veterans found deeply unnerving. The incoming rifle fire was constant, unending. His grenadiers couldn't maneuver, couldn't reposition to better firing angles. Every time a man moved, American rounds snapped past. Not the occasional crack of a bolt-action rifleman finding his range. A storm of lead that never paused, never gave them breathing room. An American rifle squad, 12 men, with 10 M1 Garands and 1 Browning automatic rifle, was putting out sustained firepower that Fröking's 2 MG-42 positions could match but not exceed. And the Americans had dozens of squads now, each one a self-contained base of fire, each one pouring semi-automatic fire into his defensive positions. The M1's 8-round capacity meant American soldiers fired, reloaded in 2 seconds with a fresh clip, and continued firing in an almost seamless stream. German defenders, working Kar98 K-bolts, managed 1 shot to every 3 or 4 incoming rounds. The mathematics of suppression worked decisively against them. They couldn't raise their heads to aim properly, couldn't acquire targets through their sights, couldn't coordinate fire between positions when everyone was pinned down simultaneously. Private First Class Robert Sales from the 116th Infantry Regiment made it to the base of the bluff at 0730 hours. His M1 had functioned perfectly, despite full immersion in seawater. The rifle's gas system, designed with generous tolerances, had shrugged off sand and salt that would have jammed tighter tolerance weapons. He'd fired 32 rounds, crossing 200 yards of beach, 4 clips, 8 rounds each, reloading while moving, while diving for cover, while dragging wounded soldiers behind obstacles. A German with a Kar98K would have fired perhaps 10 rounds in the same time and distance, maybe 12 if he was very skilled and very fast. Sales took position behind a destroyed Czech Hedgehog obstacle. Above him, German positions continued firing, but the volume of American rifle fire was building to a crescendo as more troops crossed the beach and added their M1s to the battle. The defensive positions that had seemed impregnable at H hour were being suppressed by small arms fire alone. Something German doctrine hadn't accounted for, something the bunker designers hadn't anticipated. The continuous crack of 30-06 rounds created psychological pressure beyond their physical danger. German soldiers described it in after-action reports and prisoner interrogations. The sound never stops. The Americans seem to have unlimited ammunition. You want to keep your head down, but keeping your head down means you can't fight back, you can't see, you can't aim, you can't do anything but wait and hope the fire shifts to someone else. At 0815 hours, Sales's platoon began moving up the bluff. The advance was methodical, rehearsed. 4 men fired, while 4 moved. Then the roles reversed, fire and movement. The basic infantry tactic, but executed with a speed and intensity that bolt-action rifles couldn't match. The M1 made this drill devastatingly effective. Every advancing rifleman could lay down suppressive fire without needing to cycle a bolt. Every stationary rifleman could engage targets continuously while his comrades moved. Fröking's bunker complex fell at 0940 hours. The Americans didn't overwhelm it with numbers. They didn't have numerical superiority on this sector of beach. They smothered it with continuous fire until engineers could maneuver close enough to use satchel charges. The Kar98K equipped grenadiers couldn't maintain fire volume sufficient to stop the crawling advance. They'd fire, work their bolts, fire again, and in those intervals between shots, American soldiers moved forward 3 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters, closing the distance, getting angles on the bunker apertures. When the Bangalore torpedoes detonated and the bunker walls collapsed, Fröking and 17 of his men were buried alive in concrete and earth. The ones who survived to be pulled out 3 hours later told interrogators the same story. We couldn't shoot back fast enough. Every time we aimed, more rounds came in. We'd fire once and hear 8, 10, 12 shots before we could fire again. Similar actions repeated across Normandy through June and July. German veterans of the Eastern Front found the Western Front qualitatively different in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Soviet infantry had been numerous, sometimes overwhelming in their masses. But their rifles, primarily bolt-action Mosin Naguns, with some SVT-40 semi-automatics mixed in generated firepower, German soldiers knew how to counter. The Soviets came in waves. You shot them down. They came again. You shot them down again. Eventually, either they broke or you ran out of ammunition. American infantry was different. Fewer men per attack, but better armed, better supplied, supported by overwhelming artillery that responded within minutes to forward observer calls, supported by air power that appeared overhead whenever weather permitted. But even at the small unit level, even in isolated firefights without artillery or air support, the firepower density was shocking, unsettling. A German squad typically fielded 8 riflemen with Kar98Ks and one 2-man MG42 team. The calculation was simple: 120 rounds per minute from the rifles under ideal conditions, 1,200 rounds per minute from the machine gun when ammunition supply permitted sustained fire. Total theoretical firepower of 1,320 rounds per minute. In practice, maybe 800 to 1,000, accounting for reload times and battlefield stress. An American rifle squad fielded 8 men with M1 Garands, 2 men with M1 carbines, 1 man with a Browning automatic rifle, and 1 man with an M1903 Springfield for scouting. The carbines contributed less, being short-range weapons. The Springfield was bolt action, matching German rates. But those 8 M1 Garands delivered 320 rounds per minute. The Browning automatic rifle added another 600 rounds per minute in the assault role. Total squad firepower exceeded 900 rounds per minute before considering their actual machine gun support. The Americans weren't better shots individually. German marksmanship training was superior, more rigorous. German soldiers spent more time on rifle ranges, learning to place shots precisely at extended ranges. But marksmanship mattered less when the Americans could put 3 or 4 bullets downrange for every German one. Someone would hit something. Volume compensated for individual accuracy. Suppression was more valuable than precision. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. By August 1944, German tactical manuals were being revised to address the firepower imbalance that was costing German lives in every engagement. Recommendations included increased use of automatic weapons at all levels, emphasis on immediate counterattack before Americans could establish fire superiority, avoidance of firefights at ranges under 300 meters where American volume of fire overwhelmed German accuracy, employment of the new Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle wherever possible, though only 400,000 were produced before war's end. None of it worked consistently. The M1 Garand had tilted the tactical balance at the infantry squad level decisively toward the Americans. Not overwhelmingly. German tactical skills still mattered, defensive positions still mattered, operational experience still provided advantages, but the margin was gone. The Wehrmacht could no longer count on superior performance from equivalent forces. A German rifle squad could no longer expect to defeat an equal-sized American rifle squad through better tactics and better training alone. Oberleutnant Frerking survived Omaha Beach. He was pulled from the rubble of his bunker, unconscious but alive. He spent 2 weeks in a field hospital before being sent back to his unit, now reconstituted and defending positions near Saint-Lô. During his interrogation, before being returned to Wehrmacht control, American intelligence officers asked him about the most surprising aspect of combat with American forces. His answer entered the intelligence summary and was distributed to units throughout the European theater. Their rifle, Frerking said, everyone shoots like a machine gunner. We couldn't believe they were riflemen. We thought every American squad had 5 or 6 machine guns. It changes how you fight when the enemy never stops shooting. You can't move, you can't aim properly, you just keep your head down and wait to die or surrender. The M1 Garand hadn't won the war alone. No single weapon system does, but it had removed one of Germany's most reliable advantages from 1939 through early 1943, superior tactical performance at the small unit level, superior fire discipline, superior marksmanship. Those advantages evaporated when outgunned 3-1 at the most fundamental level of combat. Everything else followed from that. Technical analysis of captured M1 Garands throughout 1943 and 1944 gave German ordnance experts a clear, uncomfortable picture of why the weapon worked so effectively. The reports made for sobering reading at Wehrmacht headquarters. The M1's gas-operated system proved remarkably reliable under conditions that killed lesser designs. A small port 8 inches from the muzzle bled off expanding propellant gas as the bullet passed. This gas drove a piston that cycled the action, extracting the spent case, cocking the hammer, feeding a fresh round from the 8-round en-bloc clip. The entire cycle took 0.04 seconds. The shooter's finger was the limiting factor, not the mechanism. A trained soldier could fire as fast as he could pull the trigger. 8 rounds in 5 to 6 seconds was standard. Under stress, maybe 7 seconds, still far faster than any bolt-action rifle in existence. Recoil was manageable, controllable. The M1's 9.5-pound weight and its effective recoil spring system meant the 30-06 Springfield cartridge, generating 2,800 feet per second muzzle velocity and over 2,700 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, didn't punish the shooter excessively. Follow-up shots were faster and more accurate than with any bolt-action design. The rifle stayed on target between shots. The en-bloc clip system drew some criticism from German engineers examining captured examples. The clip fed into the action from the top, making the rifle somewhat difficult to load while in a prone position. The distinctive ping when the empty clip ejected revealed when a soldier needed to reload, potentially giving away his position. The 8-round capacity was less than the 10-round capacity many semi-automatic designs used. But these were minor drawbacks compared to the sustained fire rate advantage. German ordnance reports noted that the en-bloc clip system was actually faster to reload than detachable box magazines under combat conditions. The clip dropped free automatically when empty. The action locked open, ready to receive a fresh clip. Total reload time was under 2 seconds for a trained soldier. Box magazines required manual removal, proper orientation of the fresh magazine, and firm seating. 3 to 4 seconds minimum. Range and accuracy matched the Kar98K in practical terms. The M1's peep sights were faster to acquire than the Kar98K's notch and post sights, particularly in low-light conditions. Maximum effective range was listed at 500 yards for both rifles. In practice, most infantry combat occurred inside 300 yards, often much closer in the hedgerows of Normandy or the forests of the Ardennes. At those ranges, the M1's rapid fire mattered far more than minute-of-angle precision at distance. Intelligence officers distributed bulletins throughout the Wehrmacht describing American tactics built around the M1's capabilities. American infantry doctrine emphasized fire superiority at the squad level. Every rifleman was expected to pour fire into enemy positions to enable maneuver. Suppression was the goal, not necessarily kills. Keep the enemy's head down, deny them the ability to return effective fire, then advance while they're pinned. The M1 made this doctrine practical, achievable. The rifle's semi-automatic action allowed sustained fire that bolt-action rifles simply couldn't match. An American squad could maintain continuous fire on a target for 30 seconds, a minute longer. Bolt-action-equipped German squads had to pause between volleys, had to coordinate fire to maintain pressure. The rhythm was different, less overwhelming. The psychological impact exceeded the physical casualties inflicted. German soldiers reported that continuous semi-automatic fire created stress disproportionate to actual hits received. The sound of constant incoming fire, even if most rounds missed, suppressed aggressive tactics. Men hesitated before moving. Maneuver slowed. Initiative died. Soldiers became reactive rather than proactive, responding to threats rather than creating them. This was exactly the opposite effect of German MG-42 fire on Allied troops. The machine gun's high cyclic rate of 1,200 rounds per minute was terrifying, psychologically devastating. But it came from fixed positions that could be identified, avoided, or suppressed with artillery and mortars. Once you knew where the MG-42 was positioned, you could work around it, flank it, eliminate it. The M1's distributed firepower across the entire squad meant Americans could shoot at you from everywhere simultaneously. There was no single point to suppress, no single gun to knock out. 8 rifles, 8 bases of fire, 8 sources of continuous semi-automatic fire. You couldn't neutralize them all before one of them neutralized you. By late 1944 and into 1945, some German units equipped with captured M1 Garands preferred them to their own rifles, not because of better ballistics or superior engineering. The 30-06 and 7.92 Mauser cartridges were nearly identical in performance, not because the M1 was lighter or easier to maintain. The rifles were comparable in weight and field maintenance requirements. German soldiers preferred captured M1s because the psychological comfort of matching American firepower was worth the logistics headache of supplying 30-06 ammunition. When you had an M1, you could shoot back at the same rate the Americans were shooting at you. You weren't outgunned anymore. You had a chance. That psychological edge mattered more than logistical efficiency when your life was on the line. Post-war assessments by military historians calculated that the M1 Garands increased American infantry effectiveness by approximately 20 to 25% compared to hypothetical bolt-action equipped units in identical tactical situations. This didn't account for psychological factors which were harder to quantify. It didn't account for the tactical flexibility that semi-automatic fire enabled. Fire and movement drills executed faster. Suppressive fire maintained longer. Ammunition expenditure higher, but effect per round lower. Yet, total effect much greater. The British Army, which had rejected semi-automatic rifle development before the war as unnecessary and wasteful, accelerated research on the EM2 rifle after observing the M1's effectiveness in Normandy and beyond. British officers who'd dismissed semi-automatic rifles as American extravagance in 1942 were requesting them urgently by 1944. The Soviets, who had fielded the SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle in limited numbers starting in 1940, regretted not making it standard issue across the Red Army. Over 5 million SVT-40s were produced during the war, a significant number, but most Soviet infantry still carried bolt-action Mosin and Nagant rifles. Soviet doctrine had emphasized submachine guns for assault troops and bolt-actions for line infantry. After the war, Soviet military theorists concluded this had been a mistake. The semi-automatic rifle should have been standard. Every major military power studied the M1 as the template for future infantry rifles. The era of the bolt-action as a primary military weapon was ending. The M1 Garand wrote the epitaph. What the Germans learned, too late to implement, was that future infantry combat would be decided by sustained firepower at the squad level. The day of the single-shot rifle, the carefully aimed bolt action, was over. Modern war moved too fast. Engagements happened too quickly. The side that could put more rounds downrange won. One captured German officer, interrogated in early 1945 after the collapse of the Ardennes offensive, was asked what single American weapon caused the most concern among German troops. His answer would have seemed absurd, almost laughable, to military theorists in 1939. The rifle, he said. They all have automatic rifles. 8 shots before we can fire 3. But that's why we lost the small battles. And the small battles decide wars. The big battles get remembered, get written about in history books, but wars aren't won at Kasserine Pass or Omaha Beach or the Battle of the Bulge. Wars are won in 1,000 small firefights between squads and platoons. When you lose those consistently, you lose the war. The rifle that German intelligence initially dismissed as suitable for farmers and hunters had systematically dismantled Wehrmacht tactical assumptions from North Africa to the Rhine. The weapon that seemed wasteful and undisciplined had proven to be the most important infantry innovation of World War II. Not the tank, not the aircraft, not radar or radio or any of the exotic technologies that captured public imagination. The rifle. the simple, reliable, semi-automatic rifle that let an ordinary American soldier outshoot 3 German soldiers. The M1 Garand served as America's standard infantry rifle. From 1936 to 1957, over 5.4 million were manufactured by Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The rifle saw combat in World War II, Korea, and limited service in early Vietnam before the M14 replaced it. Combat effectiveness statistics from World War II painted a clear, undeniable picture. American infantry units consistently achieved fire superiority against equivalent-sized German forces. When variables like artillery support, air power, and tactical position were controlled for in post-war analysis, M1 equipped, Americans delivered approximately 2.5 to 3 times more small arms fire per minute than Kar98 8K equipped Germans. This firepower advantage translated into lower American casualties in offensive operations, not dramatically lower. War is always costly, but measurably, significantly lower. Studies conducted by the U.S. Army's Operations Research Office in the 1950s estimated that semi-automatic rifles reduced casualties by 15 to 20% in assault operations compared to bolt-action rifles. The advantage came primarily from suppressing defensive fire more effectively. The enemy couldn't shoot back as much when they were pinned down by continuous incoming fire. The weapon's reliability record was exceptional, particularly considering it was fielded to millions of soldiers operating in every climate and condition imaginable. Fewer than 1% of M1 Garands experienced catastrophic failures requiring armorer-level repair. The rifle functioned in desert heat exceeding 120 degrees Fahrenheit, in Arctic cold below -40, in Pacific humidity approaching 100%, in European mud that swallowed vehicles. Soldiers reported that basic field maintenance, cleaning and lubrication, performed every few days, kept the weapon operational under conditions that would have disabled more complex designs. The M1's gas system, designed with generous tolerances, absorbed abuse that tighter tolerance weapons couldn't handle. The rifle was soldier-proof in ways that mattered more than theoretical precision. General George S. Patton's famous assessment that the M1 was the greatest battle implement ever devised appeared in a letter to Springfield Armory dated January 26, 1945. While hyperbolic, while overstated. In the way Patton often overstated things, his judgment reflected operational reality. The M1 gave American infantry a tangible, measurable advantage that no amount of German tactical skill could fully overcome. Patton understood this better than most senior commanders because he'd watched it happen. He'd seen American infantry advance against prepared German positions that should have stopped them. He'd seen green replacements, barely trained, survive firefights against veteran Wehrmacht soldiers because their rifles let them shoot faster. He'd seen the mathematics play out across battlefields from Sicily to the Rhine. 3 American rifles equaled the firepower of 8 or 9 German rifles. The numbers didn't lie. Post-war military doctrine across NATO and Warsaw Pact nations embraced semi-automatic and select-fire rifles as standard. The British EM2, the Soviet AK-47, the Belgian FAL, the German G3, all traced their doctrinal lineage to the M1's demonstrated effectiveness. The bolt-action rifle survived only as a specialized weapon for snipers and ceremonial units. For frontline infantry, the era of the bolt-action ended on the beaches of Normandy. The Korean War validated the M1's design in a new theater, under different conditions, in bitter cold that froze weapons and killed batteries. In the rapid close-quarters fighting of Chinese human wave attacks, the M1's semi-automatic fire proved decisive again. American troops could deliver continuous fire into mass assaults, something bolt-action rifles couldn't sustain. The Chinese came in waves of hundreds, thousands. Individual marksmanship didn't matter as much as volume. The M1 provided that volume. Several nations adopted the M1 post-war through military aid programs or direct purchase. Italy manufactured licensed copies at Beretta factories. Denmark, Norway, Greece, and Turkey received M1s through military assistance. The rifle's reputation attracted customers beyond the original American infantry. By 1960, over 50 nations had fielded M1 Garands in some capacity. But by 1960, the M1's fundamental design, a gas-operated, semi-automatic rifle firing a full-power rifle cartridge, was considered obsolete. Intermediate cartridges, like the Soviet 7.62 by 39 and select fire capability, had moved beyond the M1's capabilities. The M14, essentially an M1, modified for 7.62 mm NATO with a 20-round detachable magazine and select fire mode, replaced it officially in 1958. Yet, the M1's legacy persisted. Modern military rifle design traces a direct line from the Garand's gas-operated rotating bolt system. The M16, the AK-47, and their countless descendants all employ variations of the operating principles John Garand pioneered. The gas port, the operating rod or piston, the rotating bolt, these became standard features of every successful military rifle design that followed. More fundamentally, the M1 established the modern concept of infantry firepower. Every rifleman, a source of continuous suppressive fire. Every squad, a self-contained fire base. Every unit built around sustained shooting rather than mass volleys or controlled fire. The Germans learned this lesson by receiving it on battlefields from Tunisia to Berlin. By the time they learned it, learning came too late. The story of the M1 Garand reveals a fundamental truth about military innovation that applies across all eras of warfare. Tactical assumptions die harder than the soldiers holding outdated weapons. German military theorists correctly identified that their MG-34 and MG-42-centered squad doctrine was superior to American rifle-centered tactics if both sides used bolt-action rifles. Their analysis was sound. Their logic was impeccable. They were solving yesterday's problem. The M1 Garand changed the equation completely. Suddenly, American squads didn't need to wait for machine gun support to establish fire superiority. Every rifleman contributed continuous suppression. The machine gun became supplementary firepower rather than primary firepower. The entire structure of infantry combat shifted. The Wehrmacht's response revealed the institutional inflexibility that doomed it strategically. Unable to retool for semi-automatic production without sacrificing other priorities, unwilling to restructure squad tactics around American firepower principles because it would require rewriting doctrine and retraining millions of soldiers. German forces fought 1944 and 1945 with 1939's weapons and, in many ways, 1918's doctrine. The results were predictable, inevitable. Technology alone doesn't win wars. No weapon system, no matter how advanced, can overcome strategic stupidity or industrial weakness. But the right technology in sufficient quantities, wielded by adequately trained soldiers, shifts the odds decisively. The M1 Garand was right for its time. The Americans produced millions of them, and American soldiers learned quickly to exploit the advantage. One en-bloc clip at a time, one 8-round burst of semi-automatic fire at a time. The farmer's rifle, the German intelligence dismissed, proved Patton's assessment accurate. Not because it was the perfect weapon. No weapon is perfect. But because it gave the average American infantryman a concrete advantage that changed how small unit combat was fought. Sometimes, the greatest battle implement ever devised is simply the weapon that lets your soldiers shoot more effectively than the enemy can shoot back. Superior firepower trumps superior training when the margin reaches 3-1. The Germans learned that lesson in blood across 2 years of fighting. By the time they learned it, they'd already lost. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.